welcome to the first episode of Mixtape Stories. This is a new concept that we're starting from the people that brought you cover stories. Basically, we're going to have guests on with a different mixtape idea every episode. We're going to talk about some songs, have some stories along the way, and yeah, hopefully you'll learn about some new music or learn about a song that you didn't know you liked. Our first guest from Cover Stories, Octavio Gonzalez.
Yo,
how's it going?
it's going good, man. Good to be back.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad you agreed to do this. I feel like we're about the 5th anniversary of when we recorded the first episode of Cover Stories, so
Yeah.
it made sense to have you on.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming out and doing this.
No problem. I felt like it was the Red Hot Chili Peppers music video, trying to get to the fucking event. What's that song called?
Is it from By the Way?
Yeah, By the Way.
Yeah.
I was being pulled in every direction today, and I was like, fuck. But I'm here. We're here now. There's zero gas in my car right now. I was like, we got to get there. But we're here. So yeah.
I appreciate you making the effort, and yeah, you were the first person I thought of to want to bring this idea to fruition. So yeah, for this first episode, I had you make a playlist, a mixtape of 5 songs that you felt were good album openers. So we're going to talk about each of those songs, go into details about what they mean to you, why you chose them, why you feel they're good album openers, and then just kind of like what makes a good album opener. You know, what is it that sets it apart from other songs? You know, is it hard to choose? As someone who's been in several bands, I mean, you've produced albums, released albums. I think you can provide some good insight into what makes a good album opener.
Yeah. I think for me, a good album opener, it's important because it sets the tone of the entire record, right? So the first thing you hear out of that record when you put it on is going to be kind of your mindset going through the rest of the tracks. And, you know, like I said, it really sets that tone. For me, I think I kind of gravitate towards more explosive, big openers, which brings us kind of to our first track, which is For the Workforce by Thursday. What was the name of that record?
War All the Time?
War All the Time. Yeah. I remember when I first heard that song, I bought that CD at Target with the money that I made working at Sonic. I was making like $5.15 an hour, but I was like, Mom, please take me to Sonic.
What a time to be
please
alive.
take me to Target, and so I can buy some records. So I bought that record. I bought what else did I buy? I bought Wiretap Scars by
Sparta?
Yeah, by Sparta, without ever hearing it.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Did you know about the After Driving connection, or you just saw?
No, I didn't know anything about that. I just saw the art of the record, and I was like, that looks like it's going to be good. So I bought it, and it ended up becoming one of my favorite records. But going back to Thursday, I remember putting that in my like little yellow Walkman, and putting my headphones on, and just being like, right when it came on, it just exploded. And that band, I tried to keep that era of music kind of to a minimum with this whole segment, because I really don't have a lot of attachment towards any of that music anymore. And when I listen to it, I don't feel like any sort of nostalgia or anything like that. But Thursday always kind of, they survived me growing out of that phase. I can still listen to that record and be like, this is a great record. It's
pretty timeless, yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember laying in my bed and putting that on, and it just immediately did not disappoint me. It was an extremely intense opening track. Everything about it was what I wanted. I was searching for, dark lyrics and just insane drums and big guitars and just chaos, and that's what I wanted. I wanted something that was going to be loud and in my face, and immediately that record took me there with that opening track. So that's why I chose that song. And after that kind of set the tone for me, as far as, because that's when I first started getting into music, like making music on my own. And that kind of set the bar for me in terms of how are we going to open this record, or like what does it take to make a record exciting. And whenever I think about records that I make now, I always go back to those thoughts, and that thought specifically, how did that make me feel when I listened to that first track? And it was big and explosive, and it doesn't necessarily have to be chaotic like the way that song is, but it has to be big and it has to be memorable, and that track definitely was very memorable for me. I think that's still my favorite track on the record.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's cool to, like, if you look at a band like Thursday, it definitely doesn't sound like anything at that point in time. This is their major label debut.
Yeah.
So after they got off Victory, and you hear all these different influences like right out the gate. Like you hear the shoegaze aspect of it. You can tell Jeff Rickley's like really into The Cure. You can tell these guys really like grew up on Sunny Day Real Estate and like Texas Is a Reason, bands like that, and it all just makes sense. And it's fun to watch that kind of funnel into what Thursday is, and then from there it goes into you and into the other influences that you have besides Thursday, to see how they just get segmented into the music that you create.
Right. And that was Thursday also is a huge turning point for me musically in my, like, where I was musically, because before Thursday it was an era of like I was into like new metal and you know like all of the normal standard like 99.5 Kiss. I loved that. I still do. I love that music. I'm never gonna not say that I don't. But Thursday was the first band that I heard that was just completely different. It was chaotic. It was, the vocals were out of tune. It was, you know, the drum beat wasn't in just standard 4/4. It was like it was like a punk band. I was never really into punk music, you know, and there's gonna be so many people that will disagree that that's a punk band, but for me that's what punk was and at that moment. And so going back to Thursday, they were like the gateway drug for that era of music for me. So I remember at lunch, this girl Jennifer gave me a CD and she said, you should listen to this band. And it was a black CD and it had the 001s around the ring of the, and so that was, what's the name of that record?
Full Collapse.
Full Collapse, yeah. She didn't give me a CD case, it was just a black record. And I put it into my CD player at lunch, and I remember the first track isn't actually their opener, or the opening track is like just kind of like an intro thing, but it goes into Understanding in a Car Crash, and immediately when it's like and that amazing lead and like everything about that was just, it was so melodic and so different from everything that I'd listened to. It had so much energy and it blew my mind, and that was really when I was like, I want to make music. And because I would play music in my room, like my parents would ground me, and I had a guitar, and I was able to put little pieces of music together, and I'd write music or whatever. But I never took it to where I was like, let's write a song, let's do this. But that really, listening to that record encouraged me because it influenced me. It was inspiring. I was like, I love this whole idea of this band, this just chaotic like whole thing. I loved it, and I wanted to be that for so long. I was like, this is it, this is what music should be. And my dad would be like, this is not like what we usually. And I was like, you don't know, Dad, you don't know. You're like, so that band just was really like a big influence for me growing up, like in my teen years. So
I think it's interesting to see, like, in hindsight especially, what Thursday meant, not just to like people listening to it, but even to other bands that were already established. And I was listening to a podcast with Jeff Rickley where he was talking about there's a lot of animosity between them and Victory Records, and they would kind of create beasts with other bands. Or like, we've got Silverstein, they're like you, but the singer can actually sing, and like they would say shit like that to kind of rile them up, which, I mean, that wasn't the only reason they left, but that was part of it. And there were so many bands that kind of sounded like Thursday, or at least you could tell they were influenced by them as contemporaries. There was a factory of bands being put out that were just, they wanted to be Thursday. They set a bar and everybody wanted to do it. Everybody wanted to be them.
their live performances. Everybody wanted to swing the mic and hang on the rafters. And yeah, man, I remember seeing them at one of like, when South by wasn't South by, it was like very small. There was no lineup list or information. It was like us going into like a venue and being like, maybe we heard that they're gonna play, you know. And we ended up we heard something about Thursday maybe playing at Emo's one time, and we went in there, and sure enough, they showed up main stage, and it was an insane show, especially at that age, and not knowing that they're gonna be there for sure or not, you know. And then watching them play that whole record in its entirety, it was insane. The crowd was losing their mind. It was an amazing experience.
The coolest thing I've ever seen at any show was during Thursday. I went to go see them in Wrecking Ball in Atlanta, and this is 2016, so it's a little bit after of what I'm familiar. I'm really only familiar with the first couple albums, and I saw there was a girl in the crowd. She had 4 guys to the side of. She was laying down. They each grabbed a limb, and they like swung her back, and she basically reverse stage dive. They threw her to the stage from the crowd.
Oh wow!
And this like security guard like looked up at just the right second to catch her. And I thought, like, I wasn't drinking or anything. I thought I imagined that. I'm like, did that just? I looked at my friend who I'm there with, and he's like, that just happened. That was nuts. It was a great show, though. But yeah, you're right. I think the energy they bring, and I, everyone thinks of the mic swinging with Taking Back Sunday, but Jeff Rickley was, I feel like, doing that first. Oh yeah,
I remember we went to Warped Tour one year in high school, so that was maybe 2003, 2004, sometime right then, and Thursday played main stage. And I remember walking up to the stage, or like walking up to the area, because it was just a sea of people, right? So you couldn't get up to the stage. But walking up to that area, or to that stage where they're playing, and he was swinging that mic over the crowd. Like, it had to have been going out like 30 feet, like just an insane amount. Like, he's just swinging that thing so far out and out. I remember seeing it, and then just the chaos, like the feedback from the amps and all that stuff, like they were about to play and perform, and it was just like the build up for it was amazing. Yeah,
I think that it's like a yo-yo trick, but just going out is like a superhero shit. Like just going out and like you don't know if if you feel like any moment the mic could just come off and like go.
Oh yeah, I thought about that all the time. I was like, man, that shit's gonna fly off and hit somebody.
It's like watching a 3D movie, but in real life.
But really, like, and you would see other bands doing that too, and like you said, but it never looked as like iconic as when he would do it. When I think about that, like you said, I mean, I love Taking Back Sunday or whatever, but they don't hold a candle to Thursday. So
it's interesting, like Jeff Rickley as a performer, but also as like a lyricist. And there's a lot of discourse going around with like Taylor Swift that like guys don't have a Taylor Swift. And I feel like in 2001 to 2004, for people our age and the music that we listen to, Jeff Rickley was Taylor Swift.
Fuck yeah.
I feel like there's so I've had friends who like would write his lyrics like on binders. And things
I would
like,
do it all the time. Yeah, my binder was like huge. It said "War" all the time. Like I'd walk. I thought I was the coolest person ever. I was like, fuck yeah. Nobody knows about this. I'm dark.
I'm so mysterious.
Yeah.
There's and there's a part of things too where he wanted to be an English teacher before he decided he wanted to be in a band. And I feel like there's a lot of guys from this era, this post-hardcore era, that like were either English teachers or like were studying English. And I feel like you see that in the lyrics, and it was weird that it was so connected, that there's so many people like that, especially if they didn't even know each other.
Yeah. His lyrics were definitely what I gravitated towards the most. They were just so dark and so cryptic, and even at that young, like I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. You know what I mean? I was just like, he was so dark. It's like that song, like the opening track, and he's talking about like just keep making copies of copies. I'm just like, fuck yeah, make those copies, bro.
I was listening to that same interview. He was talking about how they were touring for War all the time, and one of the security guys came up to him and was like, hey, I love Full Collapse. You guys remind me of Bruce Springsteen. And he's just like, I I don't really listen to Bruce Springsteen. Like, you know, we're from Jersey, but like, and then he, like, as he got older, he started realizing the connections, like, even subtly, like, oh, we did kind of, you know, we have similarities. And I think it's fun to see, like, these influences that you don't even realize are there. I mean, I guess growing up in New Jersey, that's like a law. Like, you have to, like, be inspired by Bruce Springsteen. But it's fun to see that. Are there any artists that you've learned, like, recently that you kind of either have been told you sound like and you never really got it, and then the more you listen to your own music, you kind of feel like you can kind of see it?
I think with older projects, I was kind of always closed ear on people saying that we sounded like a certain band, and it was like very unflattering for me. But I think more so now that I allow myself, not like kind of separated myself from past projects and things like that, and, you know, looking back and people saying, you know, we sounded like, I would always get like Early November, Jimmy Eat World, for Fader Friend, which is like extremely flattering if you think about it. I love those bands. So for people to put us in that same catalog was really awesome, and I definitely see it. I definitely hear it now, and I think I heard it then too. I mean, that's what I was inspired by then, you know. So yeah, definitely hear a lot of what people said before, and I can hear it now more so than ever.
How do you? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think with music though, what I'm. You know, it's really weird because people say, Octavio, you like music, you probably know so much about music, and the truth is I don't know a lot. I'm not a big music buff, like music history and things like that. Like, a great person for this is like my brother. My brother is a fucking music buff. He knows everything about everything in music. He knows all the names of all the famous musicians. He can tell you when every record came out. He knows all about it, right? But I never learned about that stuff. I definitely have some favorite musicians and favorite bands and things like that, but I never went far enough to like learn about them in detail. I think what inspired me the most as a musician was sort of time periods. I really loved like certain moments in time with music and kind of taking everything as a whole from that time, and that's what would really inspire me. So I think a lot of my music is definitely more influenced and inspired by time than it is for like specific bands. But I mean, the Goo Goo Dolls, huge for me. So a lot of people will probably say a lot of stuff that I write sounds similar to that. But yeah, so the whole influence thing is it's an interesting thing for me.
Yeah, I feel like there's always this sense of like synergy with the, like, you look at the time frame and you look at like what you were listening to, and do you feel you're more like, you are obviously inspired by the 90s a lot, and we're going to talk about that in detail. But that's always kind of been consistent with you. I feel like some of your more recent stuff has gotten a little bit more vibey, a little bit more like kind of dream wave, like dream pop kind of stuff. Yeah. When you first started writing music, could you see yourself getting to a point where you're kind of experimenting with your sound, or did you feel that your style was going to kind of not say stagnant, but like kind of stay consistent?
I think that there's been a level of consistency with what I've done musically through the entire timeline. But there has been a lot of growth with it. And I think it's like a piece of putty, right? Or like clay, and you're sculpting something out. And you definitely have the outline of it. And that's what it's always been, right? But as the years pass and, you know, I get better at writing songs, and the clearer that image and more detailed that sculpture comes out. So it's definitely progressed, but I don't think that the sculpture itself ever changed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there are like core elements. There's like a foundation to what you're doing,
Right?
And just because whatever's over it is like whatever is like put over it doesn't mean that that's not still there.
Right. And lately, so you're right. Like, so the 90s have been always huge for me. That's always been an influence in my life, whether it was when I was doing Fader Friend or Westbound Departure or whatever project that I was in between. But lately, I've been doing my own thing by myself, with Aaron Clayton helping me out too. And I've really just gone back to, I just want to make music that I truly love, you know, like, and I think for a long time, whether it was Westbound or Fader Friend, it was like always kind of pushing towards a certain genre of music, you know, which I still loved. All those bands and things like that, I loved those bands, and I loved what we did, and I loved the music we made and everything. But I think right now what I'm doing is just so much more genuine to who I am and why I started playing music, like the music that really inspired me as a child, like growing up and being in like the kitchen at like midnight with my dad drinking beer. He was drinking a beer, obviously, but like he would bring home a CD, you know, and like we'd listen to that. And I remember that being like, that was the music, you know, that was what it was. And it was a lot more just genuine, and like music in itself, the thought of music was a lot more just innocent. You know, you didn't think about, well, this is what it takes, this is what you have to do, and you running campaigns for your music and everything about it. It was just about music, listening to it. You were a true listener at that moment. And I think that's important. Some people get away from just being a listener. And I think that's a good thing with this, like this podcast, the idea of it brings you back to being a listener, you know, because you're asking about, well, what are your favorite opening tracks, and that kind of expands into the entire record, and it expands into what we're talking about now. We started talking about an opening track, and now here we are talking about where I'm at musically in my career. So yeah, I think it's just really important to not forget to listen to music, and listen to yourself, listen to your own music. And if it's something that you don't enjoy, then don't put it out, because it's not worth it. So
yeah, I think that's the goal of this podcast, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what I'm going for. You know, you mentioned the 90s, so this takes us to your second song, which is Semisonic, Closing Time, which is an all-time, like, this is a song that people either love it or hate it because they hear it so much. And I don't think anybody who dislikes it because of the song. Just hear it every time it's 2 a.m. at a bar, you know, they're ready to go. What makes this a good opening track? Why did you choose this song?
So I chose this song because there are a few reasons, but the main reason I chose it was that it was unique out of the group of songs that I chose. Simply because this song, ironically, it's a closing song. So I feel like this band decided to close their record immediately. Like the rest of the record's phenomenal too. But Feeling Strange is fine. But that song, it was just such a unique option, and for them to go with that, they're like, this is the first song on the record. It just doesn't sound like a first song. But they did it, and it worked, oddly enough. Not only that, but I chose that song because of how iconic it is. You know, people can say they hate it, but they don't. Yeah. They know every word to that song. Me as a musician, that has always been my goal. I don't really care about my name lasting out in the music world, but I would love to write a song that is timeless. And that song will be played till the end of humanity. That song's going to always be there. Whether you know who sang that song or not, you're going to know Closing Time. And that is like the biggest goal in music for me. It's not necessarily for me to be a name in somebody's house, but just to be a song that is playing at the edges of the earth, in the middle of nowhere, on somebody's radio, and people singing it because they know it. And that is one of those songs. It's timeless. It's everywhere. Everybody knows it. There's not a single person that doesn't. And that's why I love that song so much. And it's an amazing song.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song in the sense that like it's about closing time, literally, but it's also about being born.
Yeah.
So Dan Wilson, the singer / songwriter, they were tired of playing the same song for their closing from their first album. So his other bandmates were like, write a new song to close out with. It's like, okay, closing time. This is perfect. Halfway through, his wife is pregnant, and he realized like, oh shit, this is also about being removed from the womb. So it kind of went from there. And there's this whole, to kind of just give the clip notes, the spark notes, there's this whole situation where his daughter Coco was born 3 months early. So after 6 months, she's in ICU. They were recording this album. Doctor told him, hey, stay occupied, do what you got to do, come when you can. And while they're recording this, she's in the hospital. So it became kind of sentimental because the song is about her essentially. And then the day she's released from the hospital was the day that this song went to the radio stations. The driver of the ambulance said, hey, you're that guy from Semisonic. I love your song. The one that says, I know who I want to take me home. And it just like hit him all at once. He's taking his daughter home in disguise. Yeah. It's just beautiful. I've always loved this song, but hearing that story just makes me like appreciate it even more. Yeah.
I've never heard that story. So that is a whole new take on our outlook on that song. Every time I hear that song, I guess I'm pretty black and white about it. I think about, just being at the bar, like things are winding down. It's like, I know who I want to take me home. It's kind of like, what is the word I'm looking for? Like hopeless romantic type thing.
Yeah.
I've never actually looked up what the meaning of that song was or what it was about, but I did read I didn't read about it, but I had heard a long time ago that they were in a studio and they were like, let's make a hit, like a radio hit, and they wrote Closing Time. So that was like, it was intentionally written to like break the charts. They were like, we can do it. And then they did it.
It's funny because I saw he was on like an Instagram reel where he said his lawyer reached out to him and was like, I just heard Closing Time. And he was kind of like a dick about it. Was like, you finally wrote a song dumb enough to be a hit. And he was like, well, okay, thanks, I guess. but yeah, that's another beautiful thing about it is when you're talking about like looking at it black and white, that's intentional. Like you can make the universal aspect of it about leaving the bar and have that hopeless romanticism without knowing anything about the background, and it still hits similarly. Right. He cited this poet Elizabeth Bishop, how she's constantly using metaphors, and sometimes the metaphors aren't as obvious, but who cares as long as he knows what it also means. If you can get something out of it, that's the goal. Right.
Yeah, that's a big thing for like lyrics for me as well. It's like I want to be clear with what I'm talking about, but I also want people to create their own idea of what a song is. Like, whatever you take from it, that's what it is. You know what I mean? I don't really want to worry too much about like, well, this is actually what it's really about, and it's not. I want you to create an experience, and for you, like whatever feeling you get or whatever thought you think of, whatever it makes you feel, that's what that song is about. So that's really cool. The whole thing about kind of just taking lyrics and whatever like if you understand it, that's great, but if you don't, it's okay too,
Yeah, that's what we talked about in cover stories a lot. It's like the death of the author. Like, there, of course, is everyone who writes something for the most part has a meaning, and that's their meaning. It doesn't mean it is the meaning of the song necessarily. Yeah. Because, like you said, people can interpret it, and that's what's kind of great about, I think, this era of songwriting, especially pop rock. I mean, you've got guys like Dan Wilson, who also, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, he co-wrote "Someone Like You" by Adele.
Oh, no shit.
He also writes for Taylor Swift, and he wrote the Chicks, formerly the Dixie Chicks song, their comeback song. Okay. I can't remember the name of it, but he's won several Grammys. He's a big songwriter.
Yeah. That's cool. I love that. I love hearing about that. I didn't know that, but that makes total sense. I mean, he has the gift.
Oh yeah. And it's something that is kind of neat with this era of 90s songwriters, and that you've got these radio hits, but there's it's kind of a choose your own adventure. Like you said, you could have like the literal meaning, or you can have like this can mean something to somebody totally different. It could be a metaphor that was completely missed.
That's actually one of my biggest like musical career goals, is to be a songwriter on a songwriting team for a big artist. I'd love to contribute to, you know, another artist without me. My name would obviously be in the credits or whatever, but like I don't need to be the person that is playing the song. I would love to just help write a huge song for an artist. I think that's super awesome. What was that guy's name from the singer from As Tall as Lions? He wrote or he co-wrote or whatever that Olivia Rodrigo song that like launched her into stardom.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which is amazing to hear, right? Like, there's so many people that we looked up to or we loved back in the day, and they're still doing things, but it's all behind the scenes. They're still writing great, huge songs, which is really cool. I would love to finish off my career as a musician like that.
Yeah, I mean, you got like Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne, who has written for everybody, but wrote for everybody before he died. He's got like Josie and the Pussycats, That Thing You Do. Like, those songs are timeless, and he had a hand in all of those. Yeah. And then you've got, I mean, even like, I was never into Steel Train, but Jack Antonoff is everywhere now.
Oh, right. We were just talking about him. What does he do? What was he? He just wrote something.
He did Taylor Swift. He produced her last album.
That's right.
But he's also, I mean, most people know him for Fun, but I mean, Steel Train, Drive Through Records, that was my introduction to him. You know?
Funny thing about Steel Train was that we actually played with them, and in Austin in a parking lot at an apartment complex.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then we partied with them till like 4 a.m. And they were really cool. So that guy, that singer, he was there with us. So
what a time to be alive.
Yeah.
Going, you know, with Semisonic, do you remember like the first time you heard it, or when it became a song that you love?
That song came out in 1998. Yeah. So I can't remember how old I was then. I'm 36 now, so.
We're 11-ish.
Yeah. I remember MTV being huge for me. So, music video world was everything for me. And that's why still music videos for me are so important musically. It's like I have to make a video with the song or the song doesn't come out. Because I grew up loving music videos. I sit for hours and hours and hours. That's what was on the TV. But yeah, that song would come out on MTV. That music video, I remember like the colors and everything is like that
green
seafoam color. Yeah. And it's just the coolest video. And I remember watching that over and over again and just being like, these guys are so fucking cool.
It was one of the first songs I remember from Now That's What I Call Music.
I
looked it up. It's on volume 2, and looking at that track list, I think that might be the best Now That's What I Call Music.
Oh yeah, that's such a hard thing to top. That song is like unbeatable, really. That record though is really great. Like, just kind of sum up that record. What we're talking about is like opening track. So that song, it works because it's so great, right? It's a timeless song. But anybody else that would try to do something similar, I don't think it would ever work.
Yeah.
So. The next song off that record was an amazing follow-up too, because I think that was the second single off the record.
That was the first single on the record, but yeah, there is another one, and I can't.
Well, the second single off that record was "Singing in My Sleep," right?
I don't remember actually.
So "Singing in My Sleep" was also like a huge song. That was like. I don't know if you ever listened to that song.
I listened to the whole album. This is the first time I actually listened to the whole album, because I've always been single driven in terms of that. But in prep for this, I was just like, yeah, this is way. Not that I thought it was gonna be bad, but it's way better than I was expecting.
"Singing in My Sleep" and "Closing Time" are the two definitive songs on the record. The rest of the record is very like Oasis style music. I like Oasis; they're fine, but I'm not like crazy about Oasis. So people get mad about that.
It's definitely it borders the line on mom rock, you know, to an extent. It's definitely grocery store.
Yeah.
But those harmonics on "Closing Time, that's what sucked me in, man. Like, just hearing that. This is before I even played guitar. Like, hearing those and just like, oh, like this. Even though it's like tame rocking, it's just like was so rocking to me.
What harmonics are you talking about?
Just in the chorus, to like right when they come in and the swell.
Right, yeah.
You know,
yeah. The raking and the harmonics in it, it's super.
And then that guitar sound, it's like there's fuzz, but it's not aggressive.
Yeah.
you know,
the solo in the middle of the song, that and then they bring it back at the end of the song. So that song taught me a lot about songwriting, song structure.
And the bridge is out of nowhere.
Yeah,
like, it's like another world.
Yeah, it's a whole change. And yeah, dude, that song fucks.
Yeah, timeless, man. Sticking with, you know, the 90s, the Wallflowers, When Headlight is your third song.
Yeah.
This is one of those songs I feel listening to it in 2024, it feels like a last cigarette before you do something you don't want to do. Like, it just feels like trying to soak everything in before you go back from your break. I don't even smoke cigarettes anymore. But that's what it feels like to me.
Dude, One Headlight. So Jacob Dylan is actually... I learned a lot about Jacob Dylan, and he's, ironically enough, I know I said I don't know a lot about artists, but that was one artist that I really did look into a lot when I started to really try to become my own, like, a songwriter. And I was like, I need some sort of influence. And so he was big for me. The Wallflowers were huge, and I bought that record recently, the actual CD. I went to like CD Exchange and found it. And I never actually listened to the entire record, but it was amazing. And that song is timeless. It's right up there with Closing Time for me. Funny story about that song, though, is that, so my friend Jason would always tell me, he'd always say, you know, there's no crash in that song. Not a single crash.
I was going to bring that up, actually.
Yeah. And we would always listen to it and we'd be like, fuck, there's no crash in that song. It's crazy. Anyway, so he's the first one that brought it to my attention. But I was actually on tour with a band. I was tour managing a band. And it was our last date of the tour. We were in LA playing at the Fonda. And we needed a new sound guy. So we hired somebody randomly to run sound. Somebody sent us his information. He was a really cool guy. I met him, brought him in. He got everything set up. Then we went outside and we're talking for a second. And I was like, "So, what bands do you normally you run with? You know?" And he was like, "Oh man." And he's a younger kid. I think he's a little bit younger than me, if not same age, right? And he was like, I'm always with this one band. You might not know them. They're from the 90s. They're like, he's like, nobody really knows them. You know, I'm like, well, I love the 90s, so try me. And he was like, you ever heard of the Wallflowers? And I was like, jaw just dropped to the floor. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I love the Wallflowers. And he was like, immediately, like, his face lit up. And he was like, oh, dude, I love the Wallflowers too. And like, you know, we connected on that immediately. And then we started talking about... I was like, does anybody ever bring up the no crash for One Headlight when they go up? And he's like, dude, we do it all the time to the drummer. Like, he was like, every time he walks up, we're like, no crash, no crash. And yeah, so it was like a whole thing. He was like, I can't believe you even know about that. Nobody talks about it. And I actually had looked that up. And apparently Jacob Dylan was on his way to the studio and listening to a Tom Petty song.
You don't know how it feels.
Yeah. And he had got inspired by that. And he was like, I want it to be like this.
So the story I heard is that, but it was the drummer who suggested it.
Oh, okay.
So
Maybe I got it backwards.
He was friends with the bassist, and they did one with, it was pretty standard, crash into the chorus, crash into the next part.
Yeah.
And he was really into that Wildflowers album, the Tom Petty album. He was like, what if we did no crash? And then the guy that was, I forgot his name, that was producing it, was like, yeah, if all else fails, we can just overdub it. And they're like, listen to it, like, oh no, we got to keep it the way this is.
And it's amazing how explosive that song still is without a single crash. But that's the drummer's fucking job, is to keep the fucking beat. And he just does an amazing job, and he really lets the other instruments shine. And there's so much room in that recording. The spread in that audio mix, it sounds amazing. And I love how that song, the intro is really interesting because it's like each instrument has its own introduction. So I think it starts off with like the guitar, or no, it starts off with the drums, right? And then the bass comes in, and then I think it's the guitar that comes in, and
So
then
layers.
all of a sudden it's the organ, and then the vocal will come in, and it's amazing. Like every little part is so exciting for me when I hear it. I'm like, oh, here it comes, and yeah, man, that's why I love that song so much. I mean, obviously the words are amazing. Jacob Dylan is an amazing lyricist to me. I love what he talks about. But the chorus is just insanely catchy. The words in that chorus are huge. Like, it's got to be something better than in the middle.
Yeah.
That is such a profound fucking statement. Like, I think about that all the time, and I'm like, God damn it, there's got to be something better. Tell me what it is, Jacob.
It's funny because you mentioned like he's very like keeping the beat. He was talking in this podcast. It was a drummer podcast, and he was like, he's like, I've been a younger drummer, and where you want to do fills, you want to do this. He's like, but sometimes the song just doesn't call for that. You need to feel the song and do what's appropriate for the song. And I feel like he really like that's perfect way to describe what he did with that song. He also worked on "Criminal" by Fiona Apple. Funnily enough, which I feel has, even though they don't sound the same, there's a similar vibe in how it's structured. But yeah, so you bring up Jacob Dylan's lyrics, and this song is about the death of ideas. It's about, being able to continue with one headlight, like, not a literal metaphorical situation here.
Carrying on either way.
Yeah. And, I think that about there's got to be somewhere better than the middle. I always think about where the Spurs are at right now.
Oh shit!
People are like, well, we would have kept DeJounte, we would have done this, we would have made it playoffs. Like, yeah, we're not going to win a championship though. You know? So there is something better. Right now, we've got our one headlight. So Wemby is our one headlight.
Oh, dude, next season we're gonna blow up.
Oh yeah.
I'm extremely excited.
Oh, me too, man. Yeah, for sure.
I'm thinking about buying season tickets, like even like some nosebleeds or whatever. Dude. Because our end to our season was amazing.
Oh yeah, the uplift,
yeah. And I was like, okay, here it comes.
Improvement, yeah.
So I'm really excited. I love all the members on the team. I think they're great. I mean, I might be biased just because I love the Spurs so much. Win or lose,
yeah,
they've won so much that it doesn't matter anymore if they lose. Like, I still had a great time. I still love them. My mind never changes on the Spurs. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for the Mavs right now, but
I got the T-Wolves right now, man. Ant-Man's on another level. I like OKC too, but Denver's going to win it all anyway, so as far as I think.
Yeah, they're on it's 3-0 right now with the Lakers.
Oh yeah, they're going to shut out today.
Out. Yeah.
To age this episode. I don't know when it's coming out, but yeah. But yeah, I think the Wallflowers in general are pretty interesting. I mean, you've got Jacob Dylan, who's an Nepo baby. He's Bob Dylan's son, but he was he wanted to kind of do...
He didn't want his father's name behind him. Yeah.
And the first album that they put out, they were dropped from Virgin because it didn't do well, because Virgin was trying to push, this is Bob Dylan's son. And he was like, no, I don't want this to be like the main thing. And they, in a way, created like this hardship, and this hardship kind of leads to the songwriting on this album. And One Headlight's kind of inspired by that in a way.
Right. There's other few great... That sets the opening for that record. It's perfect. The opening for that song, the opening for the record, that's an amazing opening track. 7th Avenue Heartache or 6th Avenue. Yeah, that's an amazing track. What other big songs are on that record? I don't know.
I think those are the two big ones, the main ones. But
The Difference.
So I listened to the whole album for the first time yesterday, and
you never heard The Difference?
Not that I could remember before that. Yeah.
Dude, I think that was like the second biggest song by the Wallflowers ever.
Maybe if I hear it again, but I was listening on the way driving down here, so maybe I was preoccupied.
Dude, that song rips. That was a great record. And a lot of things about these records that we kind of chose, these opening tracks and things like that, is that it kind of takes you back to the 90s, in a time where not every song was good.
Yeah.
And that was a real thing. It was like, you have two good songs, pump out something else, and let's get a record out there. And some of the deep cuts, some of them might have been good, you know what I mean, like if you were a true listener or whatever, but for the majority of it, like, weren't the best, which brings me to
That's
to Len.
Perfect transition.
That record.
Don't Stop the Bum Rush by Len.
Yeah, dude. That is an odd ass record. And the thing about that record is that Steal My Sunshine, I think it came out in a movie, right? And which kind of launched it out. Yeah, Go. Go is a great movie. That song, when I hear that song, that is what the 90s is to me. That is the 90s. Like, everything about that song, like the snare is not a real snare. It's like a submarine like click. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's like, it's really interesting. That song's so crazy. But that record is actually terrible.
It's different, man.
But they were like,
time.
Yeah, they were like, we need to get this song out. So just put something together. And yeah, I listened to it the other day in its entirety, and I was just like, I was hoping, dude. I was like, let's hope that something's gonna be in here, and I'm gonna find my new favorite song, you know. But I was right. That's a terrible record.
They're so self-aware about that, though. Yeah. And like, so they've got such interesting. That song has such an interesting like genesis, because the main guy, I wouldn't call him the lead singer. He's just like the
burger pimp.
Yeah, hamburger pimp. That's right. Yeah. Mark Constanzo, he was at a show tripping. Yeah. And he had these vibes, and he listened to the songs like, oh, this does sound like tripping. Yeah. And he went to a party. The party that he went to was Brendan Canning from Broken Social Scene had a party. Oh, so shit. Like, everyone in Canada knows each other. Everyone that plays music in Canada knows each other. Yeah. He goes to this party at Brendan's place, and Brendan's playing this like 70s disco. He plays Andrea True Connection to More, More, More song. Mm-hmm. How do you like it? How do you like it? And he freezes on this one part in like the bridge, and that's the sample that's used in Steal My Sunshine. Sum 41 was there too, or like the lead singer for Sum 41 was at the same party. And at this party he puts this together, and he's just having fun with it, like with a sampler and adding it. And then I guess they got around to record producers, and they're like, do you have an album? They're like, we can. So like they set up the rest of the album was just kind of this
based
experiment.
Around that one song. They're like,
the first two albums they did were kind of more like alt rock. It wasn't very hip hop, but he describes it as like Canadian white boy hip hop.
Yeah, because they're from Canada.
Yeah. So this is so interesting how it all came together. And ironically, no, I don't think it's a hot take. This is like one of the best pop songs of all time.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, dude. That song, if you have a 90s playlist and that song isn't on it, it's not a real 90s playlist. The video is really cool. They're like on little buggies, like ATVs, right? Driving through LA.
They said they had $100,000 limit for that video. They said most of it's spent on alcohol. Just them it's just basically them filming themselves getting drunk and partying.
Dude, yeah, that was another like big MTV like video for me. When that one came out, I paused whatever I was doing and sat in front of the TV and watched it. I always thought it was so cool.
It was one of those songs, I don't remember the first time I heard it or saw it, the music video, but I remember the instant I saw it, I was like glued. Right. And your bandmate, Aaron, who I've also known since elementary school, we used to write Weird Al parodies, and we changed the words to If You Steal My French Fries. And he sat behind me in reading class, and we would be singing it, and he'd pretend to be the girl on the So that song always reminds me of him, and I'm so glad you picked it, because it's one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah, mine too. It's impossible to be in a bad mood. Yeah, like when you hear that song. I went on a little like trip the other day to a small town with my friend Alex, and she was like, "Let's put on the tunes," and I was like, "Hell yeah, put them on!" And that was the first song she put on, and I was like, "This is gonna be the best trip." Yeah, that's such a great song. Like, it feels great. It's extremely nostalgic. The amount of nostalgia in that song, it's impossible to make you feel terrible unless something terrible happened when you heard that song. Yeah. So, but yeah, the rest of that record's terrible. I don't know. There's like track 3. I was like, maybe I can fuck with this. Happen, baby. It was like kind of like DJ Laz vibes, you know, like because that whole record's kind of like a house party record, right? Yeah. Like, it's really strange, but it's all like terrible house party music. Like, I don't know.
It feels a lot like We Have Beastie Boys at Home. Like.
Yes, that's exactly. I was like, oh my god, man. The rhymes and the raps were so. It was just like I was like, oh, this is embarrassing for me. I'm like in the car. I'm like at a reasonable volume today.
They do actually. They have a cover of "Kids in America," which was for like the Digimon soundtrack, the Digimon movie soundtrack.
Shit.
It's actually pretty good.
They were signed to DreamWorks.
Yeah, I think this album came out on Interscope. No, yeah, they were on DreamWorks, and they were supposed to put out another album, and then DreamWorks folded, so they never had to. And I was reading that Mark was like telling these like record execs like, yeah, I've got a bunch of songs, and he didn't. And he was like, I'm so glad DreamWorks ended because we didn't have anything.
When I think of this song, I think of like I kind of always kind of put songs in. What other songs does this remind me of kind of thing, like a playlist, I think of Sugar Ray.
Yeah.
Fucking Uncle Kracker.
Oh, really?
Dude, I can recite that one Uncle Kracker song in its entirety right now. Like, I know that whole song. I've known it since I was a child. And sometimes I'll just sing it in the shower or whatever. It's because my mom listened to that song a million times.
To Follow Me?
Yes. I know that whole song, dude. I can do the snaps and everything. It's fucking, I know it all. But, so Sugar Ray, Uncle Kracker.
It's definitely like Beers on the Lake vibes. Like that whole, like everything you're listing right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's got to be some other ones. Lit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. So,
yeah.
Even Third Eye Blind gets close to there too. So, like Semi-Charmed Kind of Life, Semi-Charmed Kind of Life, I can definitely categorize that in that same world. Put it on the same playlist for sure.
There's that like whole mom rock atmosphere of things, which is ironic because that song's about doing meth.
Yeah.
I think we could probably do a whole episode about Third Eye Blind. Just in that whole album is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something that I feel was of the time and also kind of ahead of its time. There's like the bridge to How's It Going to Be sounds like a third wave like emo song. Like it sounds like something that was like 5 years ahead. It's just those like 10 seconds.
Yeah,
it's nuts. But yeah, man, Still Your Sunshine. It's one of those songs that I don't even think anybody I know hates that song. Like you hear about these tons of songs that are like earworms. You hear them everywhere. And there's always 50-50. It's always like kind of polar expression to that. And I don't know anybody who dislikes the song.
Yeah, and that song randomly comes up. A lot of people just randomly will say, what's that one song? And I'm like, it's still My Sunshine. You don't have to tell me that's the song you're thinking of. That's happened so many times. They're like, who sings that? I'm like, it's Lynn. I know everything about that
song. So in kind of transitioning over to something completely different, your last song is Bleed American by Jimmy Eat World. I wouldn't like, so I feel like it's not a hot take to say Clarity is the best Jimmy Eat World album. You and I are probably the only people that will ever agree to that. I know so many other people that are going to hear that and say you are wrong. I agree. Clarity is the best Jimmy Eat World record. It's there. Ever. It is their Citizen Kane. Yeah. Like they peaked too early, essentially, which is why part of why I didn't do well. Bleed American is. I mean, I'll let you expand on this more to say why you picked it, but I see it as they went back to basics. Clarity is more sprawling. It's out there. It's epic. They have a 16-minute song that is beautiful. And Bleed American's like, no, fuck that. We're going to make a 3-minute song and we're going to rock your face off. Yeah. That kind of segues, it kind of goes all the way back to the beginning. It kind of ties everything together. Bleed American is one of the most explosive opening tracks out there, like in the rock world, right? It's huge, big guitars in the beginning, huge snare in the beginning, and it just gets you so pumped. Funny thing about this song is that I hated that song. Oh, really? I hated Jimmy Eat World, and I hated that song when it would come on MTV. I was like, this is the worst fucking band ever. I hated it, and I did not see the light with Jimmy Eat World until I met Richard and Seth and, you know, my group of friends. Westbound Departure. Yeah. And they were like, you are 100% wrong. You need to listen to this record. And we listened to it in Seth's Blazer, like his old big steel Blazer. I don't even know what year it was, but
He turned it on and his terrible stereo system in there, and we listened, and I was like, I'm wrong. This is amazing. But yeah, I that was a band where I did not like them when I was younger. I thought they were terrible. The verse was just pulled my ear the wrong way. I remember listening to it and I was like, why is he sing like that? Why is this is terrible? But then listening to it now, it's a masterpiece. It's one of the best songs ever. It gets me hyped every single time I listen to it. And I think I chose that song because it is an explosive song, and it's a great way to open up a record. And it was a big fuck you because I think like that whole record was about them. They were shelved, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Was that record released on a label?
It was on Capitol, but they did a lot of stuff in between Clarity. Like they released their singles. It's not really an EP, but it's kind of more of a comp of like B-sides. Which Singles has the best Jimmy Eat World opener of all time. It's called Opener.
Oh, really?
They did that song for the Emo Diaries Volume 1. And I'm going to probably write about this because it's one of my favorite openers. It is the most epic songs that Jimmy Eat World has ever written.
I don't know if I've listened to that song.
Oh, I got to show it to you, man. It's so good. But yeah, you're right. I don't know if they were shelved, but they definitely, Capitol kind of lost interest in them.
Right.
They did a lot of touring. They did a lot of recording for, I think I can't remember the name of the record label they released singles on.
Because I thought they had released the record and then it did terrible, and then they re-released it on their own. Am I wrong? I don't know. Maybe that whole
Clarity
story
didn't do very well at first. It's definitely one of those in hindsight people would appreciate it more.
Yeah. I'm talking about Bleed American though. I think Bleed American was. I don't know. I should have done more research with this. If Anthony was here, he'd know everything about this, but I don't know.
There was like an EP. I know there was a split with the band Jebediah, and then there were singles. I don't know of anything else in between Clarity and Bleed American. But I mean, there may be some confusion in the sense that this came out July or June of 2001, and then 9/11 happened, so they changed the name to Sugar Sweat Tears. And there's an EP. There's a UK EP. With Bleed American titled Sugar Sweat. Sugar Sweat, Salt Sweat Sugar. But yeah, no, I think this album is so good. I had kind of the opposite. I love this first track when I heard it. My introduction to Jimmy Eat World was Mojo Records put out a Duran Duran tribute album, and they did a cover of New Religion by Duran Duran. And it was a lot more somber and then it goes, the last 2 minutes are just like loud and crazy, and I loved it. I heard Bleed American, loved it. I bought the CD and I was so disappointed because it was so poppy.
Yeah.
It wasn't until years later I'm like, oh no, this album's amazing.
I think my favorite I think Clarity, it will be my favorite Jimmy World song ever. But right on top of that, or right beside it, is If You Don't. That song is incredible, and that's on Bleed American. Yeah, that's probably my favorite Jimmy Eat World song outside of Clarity. The track, not the album.
Yeah, I think as a whole, Clarity is better, but I feel like individually the songs are better on Bleed American, if that makes sense. Like as a whole,
I've even had some people argue that Futures is the best Jimmy World song, and that blows my mind. But
it's fine.
Yeah.
I like it, but not to this extent. And part of it maybe have to do with like where I was when I was listening to this album. Even I was 8th grade. We were in 8th grade when this came out. Like, what do you have that is going on and you're in 8th grade? But I think this is. They talk about 2001 between this and Full Collapse. This is like the equivalent of Nevermind coming out in 91. This is the entrance into like third wave emo into the mainstream.
Right.
Especially the middle, which was my least favorite song on that album for a while.
Yeah.
I don't dislike it, but I hated the music video. I thought it was so stupid.
Yeah.
But my feelings have changed about it in general. But yeah, it blew up. Like emo kind of became a thing because in like the mainstream.
Right. It brought it to the surface. For sure. It was definitely a big rope to pull it to the surface. I think I just chose that song because it reminds me of all of my friends. When my closest friends are around, that song's always on. It will make its way, it will make its round somehow, some way. And that's with everybody. I mean, that's with you. That's with anybody. That song is just such a big part of everybody that I know. everybody loves that song. So yeah, that was really the main reason why I chose that song. Just it reminds me of friends so much. So I do love Jimmy Eat World though. They stand out to me though, as you know, we're talking about, you know, emo bands and things like that, and they definitely have their place there. But for me, Jimmy Eat World is like, they're a rock band.
Yeah,
they're an American rock band. They're right next to like mainstream rock bands like the Foo Fighters. That's like the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, but, they are a legacy band now. But even as a legacy band, like their last album, there's a song called, I think it's called Dos Mil. Like I've been out of Jimmy World for a while, but I listened to their last album and I really liked it. And Casino out, like they're all good albums. They're just not into them, you know.
Man, they had released a single, and I don't know.
Big Casino.
No, Something Loud. Did you ever listen to that song?
No.
And look at the artwork for it too. It's so sick. Did you ever listen to this song?
No.
Dude, you need to go home and listen to this song because it really is incredible. When they put this song out, I was like, that song, and a little bit off topic of just this track that we're talking about, but that song, when I had heard that, it's kind of talking about like, you know, this is it, you know, like music, like your last hurrah, like, you know, it's gonna be over one day, you know, so make the most of it now. Like, let's do it again. It's, you know, that feeling, and you know, with whatever you do that you love, you know, one day it's gonna, you know, you're not gonna be able to do it anymore. And so me being directly connected to music, that's the thing that I love. It doesn't always have to be about that. You know, it can be anything that you love doing, but one day you're not going to be able to do it anymore. But anyway, I was able to connect with it really well because that's obviously what they're talking about. So if you get the chance, listen to Something Loud by Jimmy Eat World. And that actually came out, it's been a couple of years now, I guess. So let me see what the date is on that one. 2022.
Okay.
So yeah, if you get the chance, listen to it. It's a great track.
Yeah, no, I definitely will. I think that it's kind of interesting because I am looking at my notes here, and there's another reference to Bruce Springsteen. I forgot to bring up Wallflowers have a Bruce Springsteen reference in that song. There's 2 lines that they've taken. I wasn't expecting this to be an episode about Bruce Springsteen and Undercover, but like, I think it's just so interesting that all 3 of these bands sound very different, and they're all from different. I mean, Thursday's from the same time period as Jimmy Eat World, but you wouldn't necessarily associate them in terms of songwriting style, and that there's Bruce Springsteen embedded in each of them.
Right.
Is there any artists out there that you've kind of come to, like older artists that you've kind of come to later and realized like how much you kind of look to them as an influence, even though you would have never considered them like an influence when you started songwriting?
Yeah, there is actually. I had recently dived back into, because when I think of the 90s, I don't think of grunge music like the way everybody does. I think of like the one-hit wonder bands like the Jim Blossoms, Semisonic, things like that, you know. Because that's an area of music that really like bled into the early 2000s also. Like you have like Vertical Horizon, you have Lifehouse, you know, people that were writing those big songs. And that's my favorite. That'll always be my favorite forever. But I had gone back like a month ago and was just trying to find something interesting to listen to. And for some reason, I saw a reel on Instagram, and it was Scott Weiland.
Oh yeah,
from the Stone Temple
STP,
Pilots.
yeah.
And the way he was moving on stage, and I was like, and I remember listening to all those songs when I was younger, you know, and I forgot all about him. And that video just really caught my eye, and I was like, let's go listen to the Stone Temple Pilots. So I went back and I listened to all of their hits and like their records and learned about Scott Weiland. And dude, I was so inspired by his whole person and what they went through. And they were accused of being like the copycat Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Yeah. So To me, they sound entire. I hate Pearl Jam. I fucking hate Pearl
You're
Jam.
just not
I
listening to
don't
the right
like.
songs.
No, dude. Fuck Eddie Vedder. But dude, yeah, I love the Stone Temple. I ended up going back and learning all of the hits on the guitar, and
those guitar riffs are like
insane.
Yeah.
And yet they're brothers.
Yeah.
The bass player and the guitar player, which makes a lot of sense. Their chemistry together was insane, and just that their live presence and watching that guy go through what he went through with drugs and everything, but putting it out all on the floor like when he was playing live. They need to make a movie about that.
Oh yeah,
because he's got the life for it. Yeah, and it was really like inspiring and influenced me in that moment. And I'm writing a record right now, and none of the songs sound like a Stone Temple Pilots song, but they definitely influenced the vibe. And so, yeah. I love that band.
It's interesting to like listen to like Sex Type Thing and then listen to Sour Girl. Like,
right.
It's like, this is the same band. Like,
yeah.
I love Sour Girl because I remember MTV was such MTV2 especially. Like, you don't want to go to sleep. You're at Saturday night and you're 14 and a nerd. You're watching MTV2, and I remember watching that music video because I was in love with Sarah Michelle Gellar at the time, and she's in that, and she's super like goth looking, and Scott Weiland is just like one of those like
doing
floaty things.
He had this dance that he would do on stage, you know, and like it was just the most interesting thing. And I remember like even my dad, like when we were growing up, my dad would stand in front of the TV with the beer and he'd be like, check him out, look him do that fucking dance and shit. And like my dad was like, you know, drunk trying to do it too, and I was like, fuck yeah, that guy's badass. But Sex Type Thing, Vaseline. Oh yeah, is one of my.
That song sounds way easy. It's easy to play, but to play it right is so difficult. The timing of it.
Yeah, that guy uses a lot of those harmonics in his songs, and yeah, he's a very interesting guitar player. I had posted a video of me playing one of the songs on Instagram, and somebody responded back and was like, that guitar player is one of the most underrated guitar players of that time, and it made all the sense to me. I was like, you're right, this guy's incredible. And it was just him, you know, there was just one guitar player.
Yeah, it's so like, I feel like a lot of his 90s bands, like even Frusciante, he doesn't sound like multiple guitars, but he fills that space.
They were able to do that. They were always able to play a lead while somehow maintaining a rhythm at the same time. And I think a lot of like, and I'm not being like, yeah, that's me or whatever, but I listened to a lot of that music, so just like indirectly influenced me. That's how I play guitar. I've always been that way, where like the chords I make don't really make sense because I'm trying to play a lead at the same time. So a lot of the things that I'm doing don't make a lot of sense, but if you listen to that music and a lot of the chords that he was doing, I was like, oh, this makes sense to me. But I can see how, you know, after years and years of moving away from all of this doesn't make sense, you know. But yeah, that's the band. I love that band.
Yeah, well, cool. Hey, thanks so much for coming on, man. That concludes your playlist, your mixtape. We would definitely have these songs in a playlist that we'll add a link for. Is there, you got a lot of things coming up. Do you want to plug anything? Yeah,
I got a new track coming out. It's called Sing Stars. It's off the new project that I'm doing called SleepSlow, and that'll be out on July 1st, and we're going to run a whole campaign for the record moving forward from that. So look out for that. We're doing a music video and all the good stuff, you know. I'm really excited about it. I think it's probably some of my favorite music that I've ever written. And I think it's a lot more personal. And it's just been a lot more fun to make because I've actually been doing it all by myself. The production, the record, the art for it. So all of it, I'm big on things just being mine, you know? And when it's done, I can say that was me. So I'm super excited about releasing it. It's a 5-song record. And I've been writing the songs over the span of 2 to 3 years now. So it's finally all coming to fruition, and look out for it. It's going to be good, man.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah,
it's been great.
Hell yeah.